This is how 10,000 Spartans avenged Thermopylae. The Battle of Plataea, 479 BCE. They came not to defend, but to deliver judgment. 10 years after Thermopylae, when 300 Spartans were swallowed by fire and legend, 10,000 returned to remind the world that gods do not forget. Every step they took northward was a prayer to vengeance. Every spear was a monument to the dead. Greece was fractured, weary, and half in ruins. But Sparta had turned grief into discipline, mourning into iron. On the plains of Plataea, they would face the empire that burned Athens and mocked their king's corpse. This was not a campaign. It was a reckoning. What began at Thermopylae as defeat would end here as destiny. Stories like this remind us that vengeance can outlive generations. Subscribe and share so it's never forgotten. The streets of Rome trembled beneath the weight of celebration. From the Arch of Titus to the steps of the Forum, hundreds of thousands gathered to witness the glory of empire. The air shimmered with heat and noise, drums, horns, and the endless roar of a city drunk on victory. Gold confetti rained from balconies. Flowers carpeted the ground. Slaves scattered incense into the crowd as the imperial procession began. At its head came the trophies of conquest, treasures torn from Jerusalem itself. Golden menorahs, silver trumpets, sacred scrolls, all carried high for the mob to see. Behind them marched the soldiers, bronzed and bloodied, the victors of Judea. Their armor gleamed in the sun, polished by the sweat of captives forced to clean it. Each step was rehearsed, each movement divine theater. And then came the chained. Men, women, and children, dragged from their homeland, now stumbled barefoot through the dust. Their faces were hollow, their eyes wide with shock. The city cheered their misery. Mothers clutched their sons as Roman guards prodded them forward with spears. A child fell, trampled by the procession, his small hand reaching for a mother too weak to lift him. From his ivory chariot, Emperor Titus watched in silence. Draped in purple, crowned with laurel, he looked upon the scene not with disgust, but pride. Around him, senators and priests applauded. To them, this was not cruelty, it was order. It was how gods rewarded the strong. A herald stepped forward, his voice booming over the crowd. Behold the vengeance of Rome. The gods favor the just, and the just are Roman. The people screamed their approval. At the center of the forum stood a pyre piled high with sacred relics, taken from Jerusalem's temple. Scrolls of law, cedar chests, golden vessels that once held offerings to another god. A priest ignited the torch and handed it to the emperor. The crowd fell into reverent silence. Titus raised the flame high, his face reflecting its light, then hurled it onto the pile. Fire roared to life. Smoke twisted toward the heavens as parchment turned to ash. The scent of burning faith filled the air. The captives were forced to kneel before the pyre. A woman whispered a prayer in Hebrew before a soldier struck her across the mouth. Her son tried to shield her and was kicked to the ground. The firelight flickered across his face as he looked up at the emperor. Titus gave the smallest nod. The boy was dragged forward and forced to bow before the flame. His voice was hoarse, his skin smeared with dust and blood. Around him, Rome cheered, not for the fire, not for the gold, but for the sight of submission. The mother's scream was lost in the sound of drums. The emperor's chariot moved again, rolling over petals and blood. Trumpeters blew fanfares as the procession continued toward the Circus Maximus. Behind the chariot, the captives followed, tethered together by iron chains. Those too slow to walk were whipped until they moved or fell. Above the city, smoke from the burning relics curled like a new banner of Rome, a sign to the gods that one more nation had been erased. The parade stretched for miles. Priests swung censers of perfume to mask the stench of sweat and decay. Onlookers tossed coins and bread, laughing as the captives scrambled to catch them with bound hands. A Roman child climbed onto his father's shoulders and pointed. "Are they the monsters who defied us?" The father nodded proudly. "Not monsters. Lessons." By the time the procession reached the arena, the sun had begun to sink. The gates of the Circus Maximus opened with a thunderous groan. Inside waited tens of thousands more Romans, eager for the final act, the Feast of Fear. Trumpets blared as the captives were herded into the sand. Soldiers ringed the perimeter, shields gleaming like mirrors of bronze. Above them, banners bearing the eagle fluttered in the wind. Titus ascended his throne beneath a canopy of silk, flanked by senators, generals, and priests. An announcer stepped forward. His voice carried across the stadium. "Rome triumphs. Let those who defied the divine order offer their blood to the peace of the gods." The crowd roared. Gates opened. From the shadows of the arena, lions emerged, starved, restless, their golden fur streaked with dirt. They paced the sand, low growls vibrating through the earth. The captives clung to one another, trembling, praying, refusing to scream. Titus raised his hand. The crowd fell silent. Then his hand dropped. The lions charged. What followed was not a battle, but a ritual. The beasts tore through the captives as drums beat in rhythm, echoing through the city like a pulse. The crowd chanted the emperor's name. Blood splattered across marble. The sound of tearing flesh mingled with the thunder of approval. For hours the spectacle continued, an offering to Mars, to Jupiter, to every god Rome claimed as its own. When it was over, the sand was dark and wet. The crowd dispersed, laughing, satisfied, praising the mercy of the emperor who had avenged the gods. Night fell. Torches burned along the Via Sacra, lighting the way back to the Palatine. The emperor's chariot rolled slowly through the streets, flanked by soldiers carrying trophies, severed heads impaled on spears, crowns of beaten gold, and the broken remains of sacred objects that once defined nations. At the top of the hill, Titus dismounted and turned to face the city. Below him stretched a sea of lights, the eternal city glimmering like the stars. To Rome, this was glory. To everyone else, it was grief beyond words. No historian recorded the names of the captives who died that day. Their ashes mingled with the dust of the arena, washed away by rain before dawn. But their silence remained, buried beneath marble streets and temples built from their labor. Rome called it victory, but beneath every triumphal arch lay the same truth. The empire was built not on faith, but on fear. As the fires burned low and the city drifted into sleep, the wind carried faint echoes through the streets, not of cheering crowds, but of the ones who could no longer speak. The day after the triumph, the streets of Rome were clean again. The blood had been washed from the stones, the petals swept away. But the scent of victory lingered, sweet, metallic, and heavy. For the citizens, life returned to order. For the conquered, order was another word for humiliation. In the shadow of the Capitoline Hill, the captives were led once more before the emperor. Their chains clattered like wind chimes as they were herded into the Forum, where Rome performed its most sacred ceremony, the ritual of submission. A wooden platform had been built in the center of the square, surrounded by marble statues of the gods. At its heart stood the emperor's throne, draped in purple silk, flanked by his generals and priests. On the steps below lay the regalia of the defeated. Crowns, scepters, armor, standards, each piece a symbol of power stripped from those who once ruled their own people. The first to be brought forward was a king. Once he had ruled a proud land beyond the Alps. Now he was half naked, his wrists bound, his crown nailed into his skull as both mockery and punishment. His blood had crusted into the golden filigree. The crowd waited for him to speak, but he said nothing. Titus rose from his seat. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Rome does not destroy," he said. "It corrects." At his signal, soldiers seized the king by the arms and forced him to his knees. A rope was placed around his neck, red, thick, ceremonial. For a moment, he lifted his head and met the emperor's eyes. There was no plea, no hatred, only the dull awareness of a man witnessing the end of his own name. The executioner pulled the rope tight. The king's body convulsed, then went still. The crowd cheered. The priests declared the gods satisfied, and another nation ceased to exist. This was how Rome celebrated peace. Each conquered ruler endured the same fate, stripped, paraded, strangled, displayed. The executions were swift, but the ritual was not about death. It was about memory. Every act was designed to replace dignity with obedience. When the bodies were taken away, the priests began their part of the ceremony. They poured libations of wine and blood upon the earth and proclaimed, "The gods have chosen Rome as master of the world." The crowd responded with one voice, "So it shall be forever." In truth, it already was. But humiliation did not end in the forum. Beyond the marble walls, the real conquest began. Across the provinces, governors carried out the emperor's decree, the systematic unmaking of identity. Local temples were torn down and rebuilt in Rome's image. The faces of native gods were chiseled away and replaced with those of Jupiter, Mars, and the divine Caesar. In the province of Gaul, villages were ordered to erect statues of the emperor at every crossroads. In Egypt, priests of Isis were commanded to anoint Caesar's likeness with oil. In Judea, farmers were forced to carve the emperor's name into the foundations of their fields before they could sow again. The soil itself became Roman. In Hispania, the sons of conquered nobles were taken from their families and sent to Rome as students. They were taught the Latin tongue, Roman law, and the art of forgetting who they were. By the time they returned home, they no longer spoke their mother's words. They had become the empire's truest creation, loyal, cultured, obedient. In time, even rebellion began to look like a foreign concept. The people learned to bow not because they were weak, but because they were taught that kneeling was wisdom. Rome's greatest victory was not on the battlefield. It was in the mind. When a new city surrendered, the emperor's engineers arrived first. They built roads and forums, theaters and baths, beautiful things, efficient things, each one stamped with the imperial seal. But every stone carried a quiet message. You belong to us. In the colonies, every public act became a ritual of allegiance. Before a trial began, a magistrate offered incense to the emperor. Before a feast, his name was toasted. Before dawn prayers, his statue was saluted. To refuse was treason. To hesitate was rebellion. Even art was weaponized. Sculptors portrayed conquered peoples as smaller, kneeling, eyes lifted in awe toward their Roman conquerors. Painters captured the emperor as both god and man, his hand raised not in kindness, but possession. The world was redesigned to reflect a single truth. Rome's domination was destiny. In a market square in Carthage, an old woman who once served in the temple of Baal was forced to burn her own altar. Her hands trembled as she held the torch. The soldiers laughed when the flames caught her robe, turning her into the last sacrifice her God would ever receive. The onlookers applauded. Rome called it purification. Humiliation became spectacle, and spectacle became law. Every time a people was conquered, Rome staged another triumph, each one grander than the last. Captives were paraded, generals were crowned, priests performed blessings. The empire perfected the theater of dominance until even its cruelty looked divine. In the Senate, marble plaques listed the names of fallen nations, not to honor them, but to ensure they would be remembered only as victims of Rome's glory. And still, the machine turned. To the empire, submission was not an accident of defeat. It was policy. The goal was not destruction, but transformation. To grind entire civilizations into dust, then mold that dust into bricks for Rome's foundations. By the time the fires of conquest reached the far edges of the known world, resistance had become a whisper. In provinces where kings once ruled, governors now sat in marble halls, dispensing Roman law to Roman subjects who no longer remembered what freedom felt like. The empire did not need to crush them anymore. It had taught them to bow. The sun set over the forum, casting long shadows over the emperor's throne. The crimson rope lay coiled on the platform, stained dark from the day's rituals. Nearby, slaves scrubbed the blood from the stones while priests chanted prayers of victory. Rome called it the Pax Deorum, the peace of the gods. But beneath the chants and the incense, another sound lingered. Quiet, persistent, almost human. It was the sound of memory trying not to die. The empire called it tribute. The conquered called it what it truly was, the blood tax. For Rome to live, others had to die slowly. The city's marble shone only because millions worked in the dark, unseen, unfree. Every victory parade, every festival, every temple came at a price no Roman ever paid himself. The empire's glory was a debt collected in human lives. After every conquest, the counting began. Not of wealth, but of bodies. Soldiers tallied prisoners the way merchants weighed grain. The strong were taken for labor, the beautiful for pleasure, the children for profit. The old were left to rot along the roads, reminders that Rome had no use for weakness. In the slave markets of Delos and Carthage, the auctions started at dawn. Captives were lined up in rows, naked, marked with chalk that listed their age, origin, and condition. Roman buyers walked among them, touching teeth, testing muscles, measuring scars. The young fetched high prices. The educated fetched higher. When the bidding ended, families were split with a stroke of a stylus. Names were erased, replaced with numbers. To Rome, this was commerce, efficient, necessary, divine. From the ports, slave ships set sail in every direction. To the mines of Hispania, to the quarries of Egypt, to the villas of Sicily, to the construction sites of Rome itself. Across the Mediterranean, the trade in human beings became the empire's most profitable harvest. In the mines, men toiled in darkness so thick it swallowed their breath. They swung hammers until their hands bled, hauling silver and copper that would be minted into coins bearing the emperor's face. When one collapsed, another took his place. Their chains clinked like the rhythm of an unending prayer. They were not expected to live long, only long enough to fill the empire's treasuries. Above ground, in the blazing sun, others carved stone from the quarries. Every pillar, every statue, every triumphal arch began as someone's punishment. The Colosseum itself, Rome's proudest monument, rose from the agony of tens of thousands. Jewish captives, dragged from the ruins of Jerusalem, were forced to build it block by block, lifting stone until their shoulders cracked, dying nameless beneath the foundations of the arena that would one day celebrate their extinction. The irony was perfect. The oppressed built the stage for their own slaughter. When the work was done, the same hands that built the Colosseum were thrown into it. On festival days, the gates opened, and slaves became the entertainment. Some fought each other, others beasts. Lions imported from Africa, elephants from India, bears from Thrace, all starved before release to make them savage. The crowd cheered as the sand turned red. The emperor smiled. He called it generosity, a gift to the people. In one festival under Titus, 5,000 captives were slaughtered in a single day. They were called damnati ad bestias, the condemned to the beasts. Their deaths were not punishment, they were performance. The roar of the crowd drowned out their screams, and the empire's guilt dissolved in applause. But the blood tax reached further than the arenas. It reached every corner of the empire's economy. In Gaul, entire tribes were sold to fund the next campaign. In North Africa, farmers became tenants on land they once owned, forced to send their grain to feed the legions that guarded their chains. In Egypt, peasants labored along the Nile to fill Rome's granaries, their quotas so heavy that families starved beside fields of wheat they could never touch. Even peace became labor. Rome's roads, stretching across continents, were monuments to control, straight, eternal, unyielding. But beneath their stones lay the bones of those who built them. Each mile of the Appian Way was paved over bodies, the empire's veins pulsing with death. The Romans called these roads the gift of civilization. The conquered called them graves. In the workshops of the city, captured artisans produced wonders for masters who would never know their names. Glass from Syria, tapestries from Gaul, ivory carvings from Numidia, all crafted by enslaved hands. Their creations were praised as Roman art, though nothing Roman had touched them except command. Even faith was taxed. Temples demanded offerings from the poor, collected by priests who swore the gods required it. In truth, the offerings went to the emperor's treasury, to fund new statues, new wars, new chains. The gods were never hungry, only Rome. The empire's system was perfect in its cruelty. The more it expanded, the more slaves it required. And the more slaves it took, the more expansion it needed. Conquest became necessity, mercy a liability. When rebellions broke out, in Sicily, in Capua, in Numidia, they were crushed with such violence that the earth itself seemed to bleed. The survivors were crucified along the highways, their bodies left to rot as warnings. Travelers could measure distance by the number of corpses between cities. Rome called this security. For every statue of victory, 1,000 villages vanished. For every marble column, 100,000 backs broke. For every emperor's feast, a nation starved. The empire thrived not because it was wise, but because it was relentless. It did not build, it consumed. The greatest theft, however, was not of bodies, but of memory. Rome erased cultures the way it mined mountains, piece by piece, until nothing remained but silence. Native languages faded, replaced by Latin. Old songs were outlawed. Temples were converted or destroyed. Generations grew up Roman in tongue, Roman in thought, Roman in fear. By the 2nd century, slaves outnumbered citizens in many provinces. Entire economies depended on their suffering. But even then, Rome told itself it was just, that the gods had chosen it to rule, that those who were conquered were meant to serve. The lie became faith. and faith became law. Yet cracks appeared. As expansion slowed, the supply of slaves dwindled. Farms faltered, mines emptied, roads crumbled. The machine that had fed on the world began to eat itself. Rich Romans grew richer, while the poor, citizens and slaves alike, sank together into hunger. The empire that had promised eternal abundance now choked on its own excess. Still, the monuments stood. The Colosseum, the aqueducts, the arches, all glittered in the sun, beautiful as tombs. Tourists and senators admired them, never seeing what lay beneath: the bones, the blood, the centuries of silence. The blood tax had bought an empire that would outlive its gods, but not its guilt. And when Rome finally began to crumble, when its armies turned on themselves and its emperors died by their own guards' hands, no divine sign appeared in the sky. Only the quiet rise of the same dust once soaked with the sweat of the enslaved. That dust drifted through the ruins and whispered the truth Rome tried to bury. It was never marble that held the empire together. It was men and the chains that bound them. Rome believed its power was not merely human, it was divine. Every conquest, every execution, every act of terror was blessed by gods that demanded obedience as their highest form of worship. The empire built not only with stone and steel, but with faith twisted into fear. In every city it conquered, Rome's first act was the same. The temples of the old gods were torn down. Their idols were shattered, their altars scattered into the streets. In their place rose shrines to Jupiter, Mars, and the emperor himself. Columns gleamed with fresh gold, statues towered over the ruins of what came before. To Rome, this was piety. To the conquered, it was desecration disguised as holiness. The priests of the empire declared that Jupiter's thunder had chosen Rome to rule the earth, that Mars himself fought in their legions, that the emperor was not a man, but a god in flesh. Each victory became a sermon, each slaughter a sacred rite. And across the provinces, the people were told to kneel not only to their conqueror, but to the divine will that justified him. In the great squares of Corinth, Carthage, and Alexandria, crowds were gathered beneath banners bearing the eagle and the thunderbolt. Roman officials stood before them holding bowls of incense. "Burn," they commanded, "and the empire will protect you. Refuse, and you defy the gods." Those who obeyed were marked as loyal. Those who refused were crucified outside the city walls. Rows of bodies lined the roads leading into Rome's colonies, sacrifices to an empire that called itself holy. In Judea, priests were forced to bow before the statue of Caesar. In Gaul, the sacred groves of the Druids were cut down and burned to honor Mars. In Egypt, the temples of Isis and Osiris were rededicated to the emperor, who demanded their hymns be rewritten in Latin. The divine order was no longer a mystery of heaven, but a decree from Rome. Even the act of worship was turned into surveillance. Before prayers could be offered, before trade could be conducted, before court could begin, citizens were required to salute the emperor's name. Each gesture, each offering, each whispered prayer was proof of loyalty. To hesitate was to invite suspicion. To refuse was to sign one's death sentence. Rome's cruelty was never chaotic, it was sacred. The gods were invoked not to temper violence, but to sanctify it. When legions razed a city, priests stood beside them, sprinkling the ground with wine and chanting that the soil had been cleansed of disobedience. When prisoners were executed in the arenas, their deaths were offered as spectacles to Mars and Fortuna. The crowd cheered, believing the gods were pleased. At the heart of every Roman triumph lay a lie so elegant, it seemed divine. The gods desired suffering, and Rome was merely their instrument. In the reign of Caligula, the emperor ordered his own statue placed in every temple from Spain to Syria. Those who protested were slaughtered. In Africa, entire villages were wiped out for refusing to call him Dominus et Deus, Lord and God. Nero went further, lighting his gardens with the bodies of prisoners, burning them alive as torches to honor the light of Jupiter. The crowds applauded. The priests called it devotion. Rome had perfected blasphemy by making it beautiful. The empire's faith was a cage gilded with ceremony. Incense masked the stench of blood. Marble altars hid the bones buried beneath. And in this cage, millions learned to worship their captors. Over time, the conquered began to pray in Latin, to celebrate Roman festivals, to thank the same gods who had destroyed their ancestors. Obedience became a form of salvation. In the provinces, children grew up never knowing their parents' gods. They learned that the emperor's will was divine law, that disobedience was sin, that their ancestors' faiths were relics of ignorance. When they prayed upward, to Rome. This was the meaning of Pax Romani, the so-called Peace of Rome. It was peace bought with submission, sanctified by fear. Rome's gods did not offer forgiveness. They demanded proof. The empire was their temple, its armies their priests, its altars built upon the bodies of the defiant. Even in death, Rome claimed the soul. Those executed for impiety were denied burial. Their bodies were left for vultures, their names forbidden to be spoken. The empire did not merely kill, it erased. But the empire's holiness began to decay under its own weight. The emperors who declared themselves gods were devoured by their own worship. Caligula was stabbed by his guards in a palace corridor, his statue shattered hours later by the same people who once bowed before it. Nero died alone, calling on the gods that had never existed. Their divinity had been fear, and when fear faltered, the gods fell. The temples they built still stood, grand and eternal, but the prayers that once filled them were gone. The statues of Jupiter crumbled, the altars of Mars gathered dust. Even the emperor's face, once carved in every stone, faded into anonymity. The empire had tried to make itself immortal, but its immortality was borrowed from the faith it had stolen. Rome's greatest sin was not conquest. It was conviction, the belief that power was purity, that domination was destiny. It called its cruelty divine and made its victims complicit in worshiping it. And when the empire finally fell, when its marble cracked and its gods were forgotten, the world did not mourn. The earth simply exhaled, as though freed from centuries of prayer forced through clenched teeth. The ruins that remain today still whisper the same truth. Rome's gods were not gods of love or wisdom. They were gods of obedience, gods of blood, gods of cruelty. And they were all made in the image of men. The empire that once called itself eternal lies quiet now. Its marble has cracked, its arches lean, and the wind moves through them like breath through a grave. Grass grows where emperors once paraded. The Colosseum stands half devoured by time, its stones scarred by centuries of silence. What was once the heart of the world has become its echo. Rome's gods are gone. Jupiter no longer thunders. Mars no longer demands blood. Their temples are empty, their fires cold. But their memory lingers in the ruins, in the languages that still carry their names, and in the systems of power they left behind. Every empire that rose after Rome learned from it. How to glorify violence, how to turn obedience into faith, how to make conquest sound like salvation. Beneath the layers of history, the bones of the conquered still sleep. In the dust of amphitheaters, in the foundations of roads, in the hollows of forgotten quarries. They wait, silent witnesses to the empire that devoured them. Their names are lost, but their suffering built everything that followed. Rome called it civilization. The world called it progress. But what they truly built was remembrance, the unspoken record written in pain and endurance. For all its power, Rome could not erase what it created, the proof that even the mightiest empire cannot conquer truth. The air over the Forum feels heavy, as if the city itself remembers. The same stones that once echoed with cheers now hum with ghosts. Every column is a story of hands that bled to raise it. Every crack is a scar that history tried to polish away. And yet, the irony is merciful. The same empire that silenced millions gave the world the language through which their stories are now told. Latin, the tongue of their masters, became the voice that eventually exposed them. Words born in tyranny became the tools of remembrance. The sun sets over Rome's ruins, turning the marble red like cooling embers. Tourists walk where slaves once died. Lovers trace their fingers over the same carvings that once glorified war. Time has softened the edges, but not the meaning. Rome still stands as both monument and warning, a reminder of what power becomes when it forgets compassion. For every triumphal arch that rises in pride, there are unseen graves beneath it. For every statue that still points toward heaven, there are shattered idols buried below. Empires fall, but the cost of their glory never fades. And perhaps that is Rome's final gift to the world. The proof that civilization is fragile, and that greatness without mercy is nothing but a slow-moving ruin. As the last light fades from the stones, a quiet truth remains. The empire that ruled by gods of cruelty is gone, but its reflection endures. In every system that values order over humanity, in every nation that confuses obedience for peace. History's silence is never empty. It listens. It waits. Rome's voice may be gone, but the whispers of those it crushed still rise through the cracks of time, reminding whoever walks these roads that power is fleeting and suffering remembers. If you listen closely, you can still hear them, the echoes of the broken world. Stories like this are the bones beneath our history. If they moved you, share them. If they haunt you, remember them. And if you believe these voices deserve to be heard again, subscribe, so their silence is never complete.